One of the first things that I learned about coming out of medical school was the gut microbiome was more important than people realized.
There was this thriving world of cash pay medicine out there that was in parallel to the conventional system. And the gut microbiome seemed to be at the center of so much of it. And yet at the same time, it's incredibly complex. In fact, all of these chronic conditions, asthma, food allergies, autoimmune conditions, they're all on the rise. And all of them have been linked with the gut microbiome. I believe in the future, microbiome testing is going to be more common than blood work. And it's incredibly actionable. And I believe that if we can understand it, we can understand what's wrong in somebody's microbiome and how we want to fix it.
You can't replace part of the brain. Like, you
treat them the same.
Source of truth for the MedTech industry.
Coexists with the prophets.
Robot understands things automatically.
Number one show in the MedTech industry.
So Stryker got ahead of that and changed in the $90 billion company that helped a pie. A lot of things. You stayed in MedTech
with your host, Omar M. Khatib.
All right. You know, I had a good gut feeling about you, by the way. Oh,
I've been working on that.
Joke. It was really bad. I was working on that. All right. Welcome back to the show, everybody. My name is Omar Khatib. So the gut microbiome has always been a very interesting area for me. As many of you know, I've talked about it in the past in some episodes. One of the first things that I learned about, like coming out of medical school, was and this is where I felt like the gut microbiome was more important than people realize, is that if you, let's say, eat a lot of candy, you know, you can overproduce certain bacteria in your gut microbiome, and that bacteria can actually produce something similar to a neurotransmitter to make you crave more of that candy, so you eat more of it and feed it. So
Right.
The gut kind of has like its own mind. So that being said, shout out to one of our past guests, Jayla from Illumicell, who told me about Leo Grady. Leo is the founder of a really cool microbiome company called Jona, and not a first-time founder either, so definitely some lessons there. So Leo, thank you so much for joining the show. How are you doing today?
Great. I'm doing really well. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. You know, before we jump into it, maybe give us a little bit of background on who is Leo Grady? Where did you grow up? How did you get into healthcare, MedTech? And then we can kind of talk about Jona.
Yeah. So I did a PhD in AI over 20 years ago in computer vision. And I've spent my whole career building in healthcare. So I started off at Siemens building AI for radiology. Then I was in the Bay Area at a company called HeartFlow building AI for cardiology. And then I was leading a company called Page AI here in New York that was spin out of Memorial Sloan Kettering building AI for pathology. And we had the first FDA approval in that space. And then I started Jona about 3 years ago because I got really excited about the gut microbiome. And I have multiple members of my family who have Crohn's disease, colitis, celiac, undefined gut issues. And I just saw how they struggled to get a diagnosis in the first place. And then even when they had a diagnosis, struggled to find a way to manage this, these issues. And what they were finding is that, within the conventional GI clinics, they'd go from drug to drug to drug. And at the same time, they found that, what they ate, how they lifestyle, supplements had a huge effect on how they felt, but they had zero guidance in how to do that for themselves, right? Maybe do an elimination diet or something like that. So many of these family members ended up in functional medicine or concierge medicine where they could get some guidance around these other more lifestyle interventions. And it made a huge difference for them. And so I realized that there's an incredible unmet need. There was this thriving world of cash pay medicine out there that was in parallel to the conventional system. And the gut microbiome seemed to be at the center of so much of it. And yet at the same time, to your point, it's incredibly complex. And so I felt that there was a real opportunity with AI to untangle that complexity, to decode the microbiome, to analyze it appropriately, and then also figure out what you can do about it.
Yeah, and especially these days with the capabilities that have come out just on the AI front in the last few years. I mean, especially somebody like you, you started in the space 20 years ago, even 10 years ago. It was so difficult to do anything. And forget about AI related, even machine learning related.
Yeah, it's been interesting just to watch everything evolve over the last, course of my career. Every year the technology gets better. I feel like for the most part, nobody pays attention to it. And then every once in a while, something happens where everyone's like, wait a second, AI is a thing. Back in 2007, I think it was, IBM Watson won Jeopardy And if you
I
remember
remember that.
that, yeah, everyone was like, oh my God, AI can win Jeopardy. It can do anything. Like, we're all going to lose our jobs. And that was 2007. And so I think that was a triumph of AI at the time. But, the technology gets better and better every year. And I feel like people both undervalue it and then overreact, like when they see it and pay attention to it.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is that when it comes to new technologies, what's interesting is that we don't realize, like, sure, there is going to be some displacement of jobs. I don't think anybody right now is going to directly lose their job as a result of AI. I think it's, people who are armed with AI are going to be a lot more efficient. But I think the other thing is that the opportunities that creates it. The best example I can think of is when computers were introduced to libraries, like back in the 60s and 70s. And librarians like, oh my God, we're going to lose our jobs. And in fact, it actually created more librarian jobs because you need somebody to manage these systems. And I think with AI now, there's like all these, this is like scratching the surface, but I don't think, at least me as a general person of the public, I didn't know that like hallucinations on AI was going to be an issue, or data labeling, right? There's all these kind of opportunities that are springing up, really exciting industries and opportunities.
Yeah, there's another famous example along the lines you just described of ATMs, like where you get your money out
ATMs?
of. Yeah,
Yeah.
when ATMs were introduced, I think it was like in the 90s or something like that, there was this belief that it would shut down like the bank teller profession because, 90% of what people would do in a bank is take money out. And now with an ATM, it's like, well, why do we need bank tellers anymore? But actually, it had the opposite effect because you could open a bank with many fewer tellers. It made it much cheaper to open a bank, like a branch. And so what we saw was a proliferation of bank branches with fewer workers at each branch, but overall, like more bank tellers. And so it's not quite AI, but it's an example where, you think that automation like might actually put somebody out of a job, but actually it just makes certain things cheap enough that for the parts that aren't getting automated, you have a huge proliferation of them.
Yeah, it's a really interesting way to put it. I wonder if we extrapolate from that. One of the concerns is that, with AI and robotics and everything, it's going to displace a lot of people, but it could be that it might reduce the cost of even running and owning a factory. So maybe we start onshoring a lot of things that we've traditionally offshored. Do you think that's a possibility?
100%. Throughout history, new technology will have impact on the labor market, but it's often hard to predict where and how. When the automobile came in, if you were running a horse stable or like, making horseshoes, like probably not a good day for you. But, then we still needed like auto body mechanics and, people working in the factories. And so it shifted labor away from horses to cars, but it's not like all of those jobs just went away.
Right, right. As we kind of dive into specifics of Jonah, I want to start off like specifically on the microbiome. So, like in some of the past talks that I've checked out of yours, you talked about the microbiome essentially being like a new organ. And I'm wondering, like, what specifically, outside of like your experience with your family members, what made you realize that this was the next frontier of medicine? Because again, you were trained in AI, you had an AI company previous to this, so there's all kinds of directions you could have gone into. So what about microbiome did you decide to use those applications in AI? And do you think maybe in the next, I don't know, I don't want to put a number to it, but in the future that we could have a medical specialty dedicated just to the microbiome, similar to how we see like cardiology or neurology or hematology?
On the second question, absolutely. I absolutely see that being a new branch of medicine because it's really complex and it requires specialized knowledge to really understand these signals, even understand what the AI is telling you and what you can do about it. That when got me excited about the microbiome was really I would read these studies about how the microbiome was related to heart disease. And you're like, what? How is it possibly related to heart disease? Atherosclerosis, like coronary plaque development. But then you see like people have mapped out these pathways where, through the TMAO metabolite that the microbiome can actually be increasing, atherosclerosis. It's like, okay, well, the gut microbiome is affecting, coronary disease. Then there are other studies on how the microbiome may be related to the development of autism, Parkinson's, of skin rashes. We see more and more early onset colon cancer. Seems like that may be related to the gut microbiome. In fact, all of these chronic conditions, asthma, food allergies, autoimmune conditions, they're all on the rise. And all of them have been linked with the gut microbiome. And it just made me think this is a very surprising organ, if you will. And it's intensely data rich. So, I mean, just to give you an idea, like when we sequence somebody's gut microbiome, it's about 8 gigabytes of data. And to put that in perspective, that's like 8, CAT scans, right? And like it is a lot. And you and I, we share 99.9% of our genes, but only about 10% of our microbiome. So it's also very individualized and it's changeable. And so it seemed to me that there was a lot of complexity here. However, if we could solve that complexity and we could really analyze somebody's gut microbiome, understand how it's impacting their health, and then figure out where we want their microbiome to be and how to get from point A to point B, that there was an opportunity to rapidly diagnose a whole range of diseases, some of them even early, and in some cases, potentially even cure diseases.
That's amazing. And so it's really crazy to hear that. And it makes a lot more sense why we're hearing more about it now, because even when some of that information was available, that the gut microbiome is that different person to person, there's not much you can do with it, because at least at the time, ML, AI, computer visualization wasn't what it is today. So like you can't really do much about it. So it seems, I feel like this is where a lot of medicine's moving towards, is that we first started with like precision medicine. And if you get more precise, you're collecting better data earlier and at higher quantities, you can get more into predictive health, And I think like just it's funny, like, cause he was in the news this week for like, unfortunate reasons. The Liver King got arrested, but the Liver King's entire like origin story was that his 2 kids, when they were babies, were going in and out of the hospital with all kinds of, I don't know if it was autoimmune issues, but they were sick essentially. And then they got rid of a lot of processed food. They started eating more clean. And then all these symptoms started to resolve themselves. And I just wonder, could the gut microbiome be linked to so many chronic diseases, right? That some of those chronic diseases and maybe the factors around them are at the scene of the crime, but they're not the actual origin.
There's evidence pointing in that direction for sure. And I think some of the most fascinating studies that really made me stand up were, these microbiome transplant studies. I don't know if you've ever seen any of these, where you basically take a stool sample from one person.
I've heard of this. Yeah, you take a stool sample and you do it's a poop transplant essentially, but into another person's microbiome, right?
Yeah.
What are the pathologies mainly that they do that for? Is it like for ulcerative colitis or?
Well, here's the thing. The thing that it is almost guaranteed to work for is recurrent C. diff, C. difficile infections. So if you have antibiotic-resistant C. difficile infections, these, stool transplants are almost very high efficacy to work. And now there are actually 2 FDA-approved microbiome therapies for recurrent C. diff based off, the science of, how we understand that to work. But, I mean, you can take, for example, like a fat mouse and a thin mouse, and you put the fat mouse's stool into the thin mouse, and the thin mouse blows up, gets fat. And you can do the same thing in reverse. You take the thin mouse, you put their stool into the fat mouse, and they shrink, keeping the diets the same and everything like that. And there are some people, ulcerative colitis you mentioned, that's one where people have had more success. The challenge with it is very hard to predict, right? There's some people that get these microbiome transplants and they're just like cured, right? And then there are other people where it doesn't do anything. And there are other people that get sick. And as a result, the FDA has said, like, we need to be really careful about doing these. But what that tells me is that this is really powerful stuff. We just don't understand it right now. And I believe that if we can understand it, we can understand what's wrong in somebody's microbiome and how we want to fix it. Then we can always get to that cured state, much better than we can now, where we're just, so random who it's going to work for, who it's not.
And kind of a good segue. So, I want to pull up your guys' website and your product in a second. But essentially, one of the big sort of value props for you guys is that you're using deep sequencing and AI to decode thousands and thousands of microbiome in the gut down to the strain level.
Right.
If you can kind of explain like why that matters so much, and maybe what's something surprising the average person would never guess about their microbiome. And for those who are interested, maybe you're driving, you're not watching, you can learn more by going to Jona.health. That's JONA.health.com to learn more. And for the providers that are out there, there's definitely what's nice. And this is what, no offense to the other microbiome testing companies, but Jona is the first one that, at least, and maybe my memory's not serving me right, it's the first one that I've seen where you guys have a provider section, which is great because you guys are HSA and FSA eligible. But let me pull up your guys' product page here.
Yeah, and we don't sell supplements or probiotics or, make any money off of those. So we'll recommend, certain supplements or strains that you should be looking for, but we don't sell them. We're not trying to upsell you into something. It's always about giving you the most accurate information that we can.
Yeah, and I want to dig deeper into that because we had talked offline about why that's important. But one of the things that in your product page here that stood out to me was that you have this comparison where it's $715 cheaper than blindly testing supplements for 6 months. So on one side you have for $1,200 supplements, probiotics, vitamins. On the right side, essentially your guys' kit, which costs $485, you get microbiome profiling and then personalized recommendations. So first of all, let's start with the patient journey. What's the persona look like that is in this $1,200 supplement routine? And maybe not something, I think the easier answer or obvious one is the pathological side. So somebody has some pathology and they go down this route. But what's your average patient look like that is doing the supplements, the probiotics? Like, what's the trigger that gets them going down this route?
Yeah, I mean, there are really two groups, right? I mean, one are people that have some kind of health issue and they're trying to find a solution to it, right? So they hear, oh, this diet will fix you, or this supplement will fix you, or this probiotic will fix you, and they just try. And it's not necessarily tailored to them. They don't necessarily understand what the root cause is, but they'll just trial and error on these different diets and supplements. There's another group, which are like athletes and biohackers and people that are trying to look better, perform better, feel better.
People like me and a huge amount of my audience.
Yeah, and me too. Look, I'm the guy with the Oura Ring and the Whoop and the Apollo and everything. The thing is that, are those supplements actually making a difference for you, right? I mean, sometimes you can tell. Sometimes it's hard. And so, people end up spending a lot of money. I spend a lot of money on supplements. And then I don't know if they're going to work, if they're not going to work. Sometimes I'm kind of fooling myself saying, I think this is doing something. But if we look at your microbiome and we can tell you like where we need to get it to, and we know what supplements are going to get you there, we know what dietary changes are going to get you there, what lifestyle changes are going to get you there, then we can just tell you what the answer is. And then you can go pursue that rather than trial and error.
Yeah, and I think that's like probably the most important thing is actually knowing, so something this is like a very simple example. So I'm a Whoop. I've been a long time Whoop user. And so, it shows a very direct correlation and causation between like when I drink some alcohol and the effects of my sleep and my HRV. And so that's been to a point that's ingrained in my head so much that now like I really don't drink ever. Because every single time I'm offered a drink, I have that in mind. It's just a very specific data point. So walk us through. So I go and I buy the Jona Health kit, right? Whether it's I just pay cash for it, the $485, or I use like my FSA, HSA account. It shows up. What do I do?
So it's a stool sample. So basically there's a little insert, you put it on the toilet, catches the stool, and then you take basically a Q-tip, you put it in the stool, you put that Q-tip in a test tube, and then you ship the test tube off to the lab. And then we take it from there. Then we do deep sequencing on that sample that you send us, and we are able to map out everything in your gut down to a strain level. All the bacteria, the fungus, the DNA viruses, the protists, the archaea, and really give you a comprehensive picture of what's in there. But then the real key is well, now you have a ton of information. What does all of this mean, right?
Right.
And that's really the key value of Jona. Every single month there are more than 2,000 studies published on the microbiome in PubMed. So nobody is able to read 2,000 studies a month. So what we did is we built an AI system to read every study, like more than
You
200,000.
said how many a month? 2,000 or 200,000?
2,000 per
2,000.
month.
Okay.
Yeah, per month.
Which is a lot.
It's a lot. Yeah. So then our AI reads more than 200,000 studies, the entire medical and scientific literature on the microbiome. We take all of those organisms that we found in your stool sample and we go study by study. The AI goes study by study and matches the organisms that we found in your gut to every study that's out there. And so we can say, for you, your microbiome fits the profile of everything from fatigue and bloating and brain fog all the way to Crohn's disease or Parkinson's or even cancer. Then the AI goes a step further, reads the interventional literature, how you change your microbiome with diet, lifestyle, supplements. More than 4,000 different interventions have been studied. And we make a digital twin of you. And we say, what do you look like if you go vegan? Right? And we know, based on all the science, how going vegan is going to change the organisms in your gut. So we take your current gut, we apply that change, and then we can see, is going vegan going to help you or not? Is it going to fix whatever deficiencies we found in your microbiome? And then we can do the same thing with keto and gluten-free and metformin. And digitally, virtually, we can give you every dietary change, every lifestyle change, every supplement, and really at a personalized level, figure out what's going to fix your personal microbiome.
I love that. Versus traditional medicine is like, oh, you feel like this, you look like this. All right, let's try this diet. Okay, well, no, let's try like a GLP-1, and then let's do this or let's do that. So just taking the guesswork out of this, which is fantastic. So let me ask you kind of very directly. I'm going to use myself as an example. So I'm 39 years old. I'm in good shape. I eat pretty clean. I have a supplement stack. I use Brian Johnson's supplement stack, which I like a lot. I get my blood work done. Blood work looks really good, but feeling tired, a little bit bloated the last year or two and stuff. No matter what I do, definitely the fatigue. Always, I get really good sleep. All of that. And for me as a man, I was thinking like, maybe I just need to go to those men longevity clinics and do some peptides or TRT or something. So in somebody's like my case, would you say that the first thing I should be doing is testing my gut microbiome before I do any of this other stuff?
That's what I do. And like in
why?
my view, because it gives you different information than your blood work. In fact, I would say, I believe in the future, microbiome testing is going to be more common than blood work because it gives you so much information and it's incredibly actionable, right? So is your blood work going to tell you about fatigue? Well, maybe if you're like anemic or something like that. But there's certain patterns in your microbiome that have been linked with fatigue, that have been linked
Like
with...
what would be the physiological markers that it would indicate fatigue in your microbiome?
Well, our AI has read every study. I haven't read every study, but I can pull it up. And
pull it up.
It's a set of different organisms, basically, that have been linked with fatigue or bloating or whatever it is.
So literally there's specific organisms that if you see and, indexing high or low, then that's going to be directly correlated with fatigue.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Wow. Okay.
And the same thing with like bloating and the same thing with brain fog and the same thing with there are literally more than 1,000 different conditions that have been linked with your gut microbiome. And it's only by looking for these patterns that we're able to identify the biomarkers for you that have been linked to these different things. But then the good news is if we see something, we generally know how to change those organisms in the right way.
And something I want to share again, and I want to talk a little bit more about what makes you guys different. But if we, again, going on your website, and for those who are interested, you can see this table under the microbiome test. But essentially, for those who are driving, I'll read this out. You have Jona as compared to consumer microbiome testing compared to practitioner microbiome testing. The thing that you guys check off everything for is advanced microbiome sequencing, AI-driven insights, personalized recommendation, transparent and backed by science, and then quality first. And, in comparison to the other ones, The thing that stands out the most to me that the other ones do not have, one would be the AI driven insight, and then the transparent and backed by science. So let me take a stab at that one. On the
Sure.
being transparent and backed by science, why are the other microbiome like consumer testing companies, why would you say that? Or how can you defend that?
So, if you take one of the other consumer microbiome testing companies, what they might do is they'll say, your gut health score is a 77 out of 100. Take our probiotic, it'll help you, right? And like, why? What is a 77 out of 100? What does that mean? Where's this coming from? Why that probiotic? Like, it's completely.
It's a bias because it's a score that they can influence by saying, hey, if you do this test again in a few months after taking the supplements that we're recommending, that gut score will go up.
I mean, who knows, right? I mean, it's a complete black box, right? Is it backed by science? I don't know. It's certainly not transparent, though, because they don't tell you how they calculate it and they don't tell you what it means. In contrast, take your fatigue example. If we say your microbiome looks like fatigue, we'll say it's because these 10 organisms are too high and those 5 organisms are too low. And the reason that we know that those organisms being too high or too low are linked to fatigue is because of these 20 studies. And we link you out to the actual source evidence. So everything that we say is fully transparent. It's all linked out to the source science. And as a result, this is why doctors trust us, because they know that everything we're saying is evidence-backed. We're not trying to sell somebody supplements. And like, we're actually giving them meaningful results. So these other companies, I mean, maybe what they're saying means something, but it's certainly not transparent, and they don't cite anything to tell you where they're coming up with this from, but they'll certainly sell you their probiotic.
Interesting. And I do like that. And again, like there's a part of me where I don't mind for a business to upsell me on their own products, but there's obviously inherent bias in that. And something that I do, like, again, I'm just looking as an example from your website, but like if you're to show some results from the brain health side, so let's say the associations are found, you found anxiety, the recommended actions is like intermittent fasting, and then you have like a tab that shows like the established research. But then like on the intermittent fasting side is like different methods, so 16-8, 5-2 diet, eat, stop, eat. The metabolic health is really interesting because you show that if the recommended action is like getting more beta carotene, you show like the natural ways to get that. In these reports that you give back to the consumer, is there, like, for example, okay, if my beta carotene is like super, super low, do you guys have it in there where you say, hey, here's some sources of beta carotene, but in your case, you need so much beta carotene on a daily basis, it's just so much easier if you take a supplement?
We don't say that today, but that's something that is coming.
Okay, got it. But I think the most important thing is that you're giving people a direction as to what they can do and what they can do the intervention on. Go ahead, by the way.
Yeah, I just wanted to respond to your point about, some companies upselling and it's okay. You're absolutely right. And like, I know some of these companies and like their heart's in the right place and they're trying to do what they think is right. I don't know that they always have, science on their side, but I think they genuinely believe in what they're doing. My position coming into this field is that there's been so much snake oil in the microbiome world, right? So many promises, so much disappointment. You had uBiome blew up in criminal fraud.
Oh my God.
People,
yeah.
No.
I was going to ask you about that. That's like the classic one. That was a few years ago. Can you tell the story about what happened to uBiome?
Yeah.
Some people will recognize that name, but it's worth visiting.
Yeah. Well, just to finish this thought, and then I'll tell the story. There's so much snake oil. There was criminal fraud in the case of uBiome. And, we are trying to mainstream the microbiome and make it science-backed and evidence-backed. And I can tell you, so it felt very important to me that we had just like the highest level of integrity and that we just never appeared to be biased, right? In any way, shape, or form. And so, it's because of that we have conventional GI docs that are starting to use Jona. They're not using any other microbiome test because they don't trust it. We're about to launch our first academic medical center. And he told me straight up, like, I've been looking for something like this. It's evidence-backed for years. If you were selling supplements, it would be a no-go for us, right? And so for us, it was more important to be credible and just like have squeaky clean, high integrity rather than, appear potentially biased by offering other products. To your point on uBiome, I mean, basically, they got busted by the FBI for insurance fraud. Like, more or less what they were doing was they were offering gut microbiome testing. They were billing insurance. But like, let's say you send in a test, they would bill your insurance for that test. But then if they updated the algorithm, they would bill insurance again for like the updated test results. Even though they didn't run a second test, they just updated the analysis, but they would do a new charge to insurance. And so that is illegal.
That's very illegal.
Yeah, and like the founders actually fled the country and are basically in Germany now because one of them was a German citizen and the other one married him. So they were able to stay in Germany, and apparently, unbeknownst to me, we have no extradition treaties with Germany, so they can just stay there and not get arrested.
Wow. That's maybe not Elizabeth Holmes level fraud, but that's getting pretty damn close.
Yeah, so we're not doing that.
Good to know.
But the point is that, because of bad actors like that, like it's extra important for me that we're just, 100% buttoned up, squeaky clean on every side, and just like complete integrity.
Wow. That's pretty wild. For the one thing that gets me excited about our industry being in healthcare is that post-COVID, I think a couple things happened. These things were on their way and it was going this direction. But what gets me excited is that COVID kind of accelerated a couple trends. One was that a lot of the biggest companies in the world, the Alphabets, Teslas, Amazons, Apple, they have a fiduciary responsibility to continue growing for shareholder value. Apple's not going to wake up and say, guys, let's start making furniture, right? So everybody's going into healthcare, which I think is just good. It makes it more competitive. It brings in more money and everything. But the other side is that as a result of those kind of things, there's like more consumer interest to take advantage of their health. And I think like one of my favorite examples, I wonder if you have one yourself, is like continuous glucose monitoring. If somebody told me 10 years ago when I was in medical school, hey, like non-diabetic people are going to be using continuous glucose monitoring and they're going to pay cash out of their own pocket for it, I'd be like, there's no way. And I turned out to be one of those people. And so I think
why would you have said that?
I just like, well, because I was in medical school and so I didn't know anybody, but I think because I just like, I didn't think that the average person would be that interested. Because again, back then, if I thought about it, it was like, well, okay, you get the information, then what? And I think that's part of the issue was that the first wave of like data and healthcare is like, you get all this data, is like, you don't know what the hell to do with it. But now you have AI, you have ML. I mean, even on Whoop, I understand HRV pretty damn well, but I can use my Whoop AI journal and ask it like, hey, my HRV's been down the last couple of weeks. Why is that? What can I do to fix that? Right. And so I think people are they've lost a lot of trust, and understandably so, with the healthcare system and the medical system. And so as a result of that, they want to be a lot more proactively involved in their healthcare, so that's why I got excited about companies like yours.
Yeah, I think there are a couple other elements to it too. I mean, one is that, and I don't know about you, but if I try to make an appointment with my doctor, it's like, a month or two, right? Whereas you sign up for like one of these online services, you sign up with Jona, we ship you a kit that day, right? And so if you want to, explore something on your own, then, you have the opportunity to do it and you don't have to wait. And the second is, as like these doctor's visits are, 15 minutes, 20 minutes. And people feel like, I can't tell you how many customers that we have that tell me, I went to all these doctors, they told me it was in my head, but I knew I was having an issue. And then like they would get Jona and they would see it in black and white, like they had a pathogen or they had like some severe like dysbiotic signature. And it's just really, I think validating for a lot of people who felt like they were being ignored. And then if you want some sort of intervention that's diet-based or natural or whatever, the conventional medical system is not really set up for that. It's set up to dispense drugs. And again, I'm not against drugs. Like, I love drugs. I mean, I support the pharma industry.
Clipped and posted everywhere.
I support.
No, but I'm with you. I'm not anti-pharma either, but I'm very pro use as little of pharma as possible.
Yeah.
Something I want to go back to your AI. So you mentioned how every month there's about 2,000 microbiome studies that are published every month. So how does your AI actually decide what's credible science versus, let's say, noise? And how do you guard against, let's say, bad data polluting your recommendations?
Yeah, it's a great question. So it's a two-step process. So the first step is to even decide if the study is relevant. And then the second step is to judge the quality of the study, if it's relevant. So for relevance, we basically only include studies that are in peer-reviewed journals, in credible journals, based on human subjects, based on stool samples, based on sequencing, so no culturing data, based on subjects age 5 and older, right? So first of all, like, that's the first step, is just to figure out whether the study is relevant. And if the study is relevant, we give it a quality score. And the quality score is a function of the cohort size, the size of the study, and the quality of the journal it was published in, as judged by the impact factor. So basically, if we're looking at your microbiome and we want to say, does your microbiome fit the profile of whatever it is, Crohn's disease, there may be, I think for Crohn's, there's like 80 studies or something like that. They may have different findings. They may even contradict each other. But some of those are really large studies and like high quality journals. And some of them are very small studies and low quality journals. And so basically we're matching your microbiome against every single study and then taking a weighted average across all of them, weighted by quality, to say in aggregate, the literature says your microbiome, looks like Crohn's or whatnot. And then when we link you out to the source evidence, we rank it in order of quality. So like the highest quality studies are on top, but you can exhaustively see all 80 studies that the AI pulled into the analysis.
Interesting. We hear a lot these days about like a variety of different like food intolerances and like elimination diets and everything. A lot of the advice though is very generic. How does Jona, let's say, look into the gut and give like a personalized feedback loop on that? And I'm wondering, like, to kind of dig a little bit into that. The reason why I'm asking is that I'm wondering was there any sort of unexpected recommendations that you've seen it, making more often than not? Because like you guys are commercial, you've been selling these things, so I'm sure you're seeing some trends and patterns where you're like, I was not expecting that.
Yeah, we do. Everybody's result is different, right? It's completely personalized to you. As I mentioned, there are 4,000 different interventions that have been cited in the literature. Some of them come up more often, like a Mediterranean diet comes up more often than, caffeine or whatever it is, right? But certainly not for everybody. In terms of things that surprised me, there are a lot, honestly. Sometimes we see somebody's microbiome, which is just kind of bad across the board, just really, it's like a wasteland in there. Sometimes we see somebody's microbiome that is pretty good, but then there'll be like one piece of it that's just really bad, like certain organisms or some certain configuration that just looks really bad. We see a lot of pathogens. We see parasites. We see amoebas. We see all kinds of stuff in people's gut. Honestly, the biggest surprise for me personally was with my own son. It was the first Jona test that we ever did. And his mom has Crohn's disease, and he was having really severe abdominal pain. And to the point that he couldn't go to school, and I tried to give him all the over-the-counter stuff, and nothing was working. So it was around that time that we got the first version of Jona going, and we looked at his microbiome, and what we saw is a very clear link between the organisms in his gut and abdominal pain. And then also what we could do about it. In his case, it was to increase healthy fats, to increase polyphenols, to reduce lactose, to reduce galactooligosaccharides, beans and legumes. And then there was a specific strain of probiotic that he could benefit from. So that's what we did. Dialed up the healthy fats, dialed up the polyphenols, dialed down the lactose, the galactosaccharides, got him the probiotic. Made a huge difference for him. Like, honestly, he hasn't had those issues since.
That's amazing. Aside from like him being in a better mood and everything, when you work on the microbiome, did you see his personality change for the better at all, or anything noticeable in that end?
No, he's a good kid, and he's sort of like he's always pretty. He's still a little plays it kind of close to the vest, but and there was not a noticeable change. But in terms of like what surprised me, like the fact that we saw such a clear pattern for abdominal pain, and that the actions that were recommended to like resolve that just like worked right out of the gate, like that surprised me.
So, and what's interesting is, me being a father as well, like my son's he's 3, he's extremely healthy. He's quite a specimen, but there's a couple things, like one of the things is that like he itches his skin a lot, and we, use tallow butter and everything. Part of it, I'm just like, yeah, it's maybe because he's bathing too much, but could something like that be directly correlated to the gut microbiome?
Good. Yeah.
Is there something pathologically that for sure you're like, yeah, that's definitely not going to be related to the gut microbiome?
If you had like your arm cut off or something like that, it's not really.
Well, yeah.
No, but I mean, I'm only half joking. I mean, really, it's almost
so it's
everything.
it's that pervasive, essentially.
Yeah, I mean, it's obesity, it's diabetes, it's metabolic health, it's every autoimmune condition, skin health.
You made me realize, and let me double click into that. It makes sense, and I just thought of it like this. So first of all, before I kind of share like my thought, and I'm wondering if you would agree with this, can you define what qualifies as the gut microbiome? Where would it start? Where would it end?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I mean, broadly speaking, the microbiome is all of the organisms that live in your body, on your body. And people tend to think of like a couple different ecosystems, like the skin microbiome or the oral microbiome, or the vaginal microbiome, or the gut microbiome. Even within those, I mean, there's a small intestinal microbiome, and there's a colon microbiome. The fact is that what we know the most about is obtained from stool samples, right? Which is sort of the end product, the entire GI tract, because it's so easy to study. So 90% of the studies are based off of stool samples. Sometimes people will go into like tumors and get the microenvironment and do like enemas and try to get like upper parts of the microbiome, but the vast majority of it's based off stool samples.
So you could say that the gut microbiome could essentially encompass everything starting from, let's say, the mouth and esophagus all the way down to the anus, right?
You could.
Okay.
Typically what people mean though is like the colon, and as observed by stool samples.
Got it. And the reason why I mentioned this is that I think you're correct in saying that the gut microbiome would be connected to all these things, because if you think about it, your gut, and your digestive tract, again, starting from the mouth all the way down to the anus, that is literally the main thing that's interacting with the outside world and the inside world. Like the only other thing outside of that would be the skin, but the skin is really a barrier to a lot of things. But, the gut is really interacting with everything that's on the outside world,
Yeah, and I've come to think of the gut as a big sensory organ, right? I mean, think about the vagus nerve that connects the enteric nervous system, the gut, the second brain to the upper brain. I think 90% of the traffic is going up, right?
I agree.
And like 90% of your serotonin is produced in your gut, 50% of your dopamine, 70% of your immune cells are in your gut lining.
I didn't know 50% dopamine is created from the gut.
Yeah.
I did not know that. That explains a lot about why the current health of our country, linked to like food and obesity and everything, is what it is.
Yeah. And you were asking about like these chronic conditions, like these autoimmune conditions, and I've come to realize that the gut microbiome is really training the immune system in many ways, right? Like every time you eat something, you're putting something foreign into your body, right? And if your immune system freaks out every time, then you're in real trouble. You're like constantly inflamed and constantly, having a lot of overreaction. At the same time, if you swallow something you really shouldn't, and your immune system doesn't react, then you could let something through and get really sick. And so the gut microbiome plays a really, I mean, more and more evidence is showing that it plays a key role in sort of training the immune system on what to respond to and what not to respond to. And there's this really interesting crosstalk between the organisms in the gut microbiome and the immune system.
Got it. Wow. That's really fascinating to think of it like that. So firstly, I want to thank you for coming on the show. But as we kind of wrap up, you're a biohacker like myself. So if you don't mind, can we do a little sort of
You want to know my stack?
fast action, questions just on some of your stuff. So as a biohacker yourself, like what's your current like wearable / technology stack?
So I Aura Ring, Whoop, the Apple Watch, and the Apollo.
Oh man, the Apollo is the best. That's for sleep, correct?
Yeah, the Apollo is really interesting because it is not a sensory device. It is actually like a treatment device, and it vibrates. And basically, yeah, it can help with sleep, but it can help with all sorts of different things. And personally, for me, it really helps with sleep, which is something that I struggle with. But sometimes I'll just be like going about my day and it starts vibrating and like trying to calm me down. And I'm like, what? Am I stressed out? What does the Apollo know about me that it's trying to soothe me? But it talks
So
to
the
the Aura
Apollo is an
Ring.
intervention device.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
And it
Interesting.
talks to the Aura Ring too.
Really? Okay, but there's no, it doesn't, there's no integration with Whoop.
Not that I know of, but it's possible.
So if I told you, hey, you can only keep either the Apple Watch, the Whoop, or the Oura Ring, which one do you choose and why?
Aura. A couple of reasons. First of all, I've had my Aura for like 4 or 5 years at this point. So I have like a lot of longitudinal data. And so I can see like annual data now, which is kind of wild to see how your resting heart rate has changed over like the last 5 years. I also think that the interface on the Aura is really great. I just like the app and the product really well. I like the charging on it too. And I feel like it really helps me understand my sleep.
Got it. All right. Well, I've been a long time Whoop user and I was thinking about adding Aura to it, so.
Personally, so I went the other direction. I had Aura, I added Whoop. I found like it didn't really add much, honestly. So
whether you have Whoop or Aura, just one or the other is good.
I think so. But if I had to pick one, if you're like starting out, I'd pick Aura, personally.
Got it. Yeah, I didn't. One of the reasons why I didn't go with Aura is I do jujitsu and I do some, certain exercises I can't wear the Aura ring. I mean, I could. It would just be a very bad idea.
Yeah, it's interesting too. I mean, like people notice it a lot. I feel like when I'm at these like longevity conferences or biohacking conferences, like it's almost like a sign that you're in the in crowd. Like everyone's got an Aura ring.
Yeah, because for Aura you have to wear it on your index finger, right?
They say that it's best on your index finger. I have a unsubstantiated suspicion that it's just because no one wears rings on their index finger, and so they just wanted it to stand out
for marketing reasons. Oh, that's a good. That's
pure speculation. It's conspiracy theory.
Okay, got it. All right, couple more rapid fire, and we'll let you go. What's a biohacking food, drink, etc. that you use on a daily basis, you recommend to others you love, can't live without?
I work out every day, and I try to get enough protein for building muscle. And the challenge for me is always doing that in a way that is not too high calorie and doesn't have a lot of like ultra processed garbage in it. Mm-hmm. And I found a brand that's like that, which is Isopure. They basically, as I understand, that they like centrifuge the whey protein, and it's almost like like Gatorade, but like thick. So it's not creamy like your normal like protein drinks. It's like this like thick Gatorade type, but it's super low calorie, super high protein, very few ingredients. So like I have it every day, and I feel like most people haven't heard of it.
This brand right here?
Yeah, but they also have they actually sell like bottles of it too.
Oh, okay, got it. I gotta check that out. Do you buy it directly from their website, or you just go on Amazon?
I go on Amazon. I have a subscription.
Okay, I gotta go check that out on Amazon. So that's great. 'Cause same with me. I'm trying to stay in a caloric deficit, but you're also trying to eat your weight in protein.
Exactly. And it's like, how do you
It's
do
hard.
that?
It's
Right.
hard. Like I ate a lot the other day, and I'm like, oh man, I'm still like 20 grams shy of my protein goal for the day. It's
Well,
not
so that's the
easy.
thing is, so after I work out in the morning, I drink 3 of them, and they're 32 grams of protein each, so it's 96 grams, and they're each like 130 calories. So basically, you're like under 400 calories, and you've got half your protein for the day.
Oh, that's a
And
good
they
deal.
also make me really full too. So then, like, I'm not hungry until much later.
Okay, got it. I'm looking into that. That's a solid one.
Yep.
All right. So
Okay.
last question for you is that as a fellow biohacker, there's all kinds of literature out there, books, etc. What's the one book that's kind of like the entry drug to most people when they're like, I'm thinking about biohacking, whatever. Is there any book that you personally like the most? Or
No,
books?
I never read. It's funny. I got interested in this sort of thing back when it was called quantified self. I used
Oh
to
my
go to
God, I
like,
remember that. Wow, what a
yeah, I used to go to
wow.
these quantified self like meetups in San Francisco, 2012, and I had a basis watch, and I was really like, it's something I've been
You're an
excited about for a
OG for
long time,
sure. That's amazing.
but I've never read any books about it.
That's awesome. Well, look, Leo, thank you so much for coming on the show. Really excited about your company. For those who are interested, again, if you're a provider, go to Jona.health to learn more. And if you're listening to this episode, you're interested in it, go buy the product, give it a try. Let us know if you know somebody who's a physician or somebody who might be struggling with fatigue or any kind of ailment. It could be their gut. So go and check out Jona.health. And as always, I'm your host, Omar Khatib, and we'll see you all next time.
Thanks so much.
Thanks for checking out this episode. If you want to do me a big favor and join so many other people who have helped grow this podcast, take a second and look below. If you're on Apple, give us 5 stars and write a short review. If you're on Spotify, just give us 5 stars. And if you're on YouTube, hit the like button. And most importantly, if you can, subscribe. We release so many different episodes that you may miss. Be sure to subscribe and turn your notifications on. You get extra points with me if you subscribe across all 3 channels. Thank you so much. And if you felt like this episode helped you, send this to somebody who'd really enjoy and appreciate it. Share and spread the love. We'll see you all next time.